We're going to move into our first speaker of the day, Carl Moriarty from, sorry, I can't say that in the morning without a lot of coffee, from Arc'teryx, design director for Arc'teryx, is going to come and talk about design deliverables. We're really happy he's here today, and let's give him a warm welcome.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? Anybody wake up with their shoes on this morning? Excellent. I never know whether to write these things or just to go by the seat of my pants. So I kind of do origami for a living, and I can't make any great promises about how this is going to go. But we'll see where we get to. I'd like to start just by thanking Michelle and Sam for putting this opportunity together for us to all come and share our ideas. I think it's an amazing experience and sort of super valuable for us to get going. So yeah, and it would be remiss of me to speak publicly about design without thanking the incredible design team at Arc'teryx for all of the support and learning over my last 15 years there. It's definitely a community effort, and it's humbling to have the opportunity to come and speak to you today on behalf of the work that's been done there. So, I wanted to talk about design deliverables, and a lot of this came about from a conversation I had probably 5 years ago now. We had a new CEO coming to Arc'teryx, and it was a really turbulent time for the company. It was the first time we'd had an outsider come to lead the company, and he wasn't from the outdoor industry. He wasn't a user of the product. He was a numbers guy, and he'd worked at Rubbermaid. And so internally, it wasn't this great vibe about this guy that was coming, and I'd been asked to meet with him and speak about what design was. And I was really lucky that it turned out that he was an incredibly intelligent, enthusiastic, and charismatic person who brought a great strength of leadership to the company, and he really liked drinking beer. So our first meeting went really well. It went from coffee to beer to cocktails, and we got on really well for the next 5 years. But being asked to speak to him forced me to think a lot about what we were doing at Arc'teryx, what our process was, what we were trying to achieve, and also how we would know when we were being successful in what we were doing. And so it led to this idea of what we were trying to deliver from the design process that we had. And I think in preparing to speak to him, the first thing I wanted to do was actually come up with a definition of what design was. Because I think whenever we're trying to have a communal effort, it's really helpful to have a common language that we all understand so that everybody understands what the goal is, but also has a terminology to discuss the different elements. And so when we're talking, we all understand what it means. If we want to talk about proportion or harmony or performance, everybody has the same idea of what we mean by performance within the company. So I started with what is design, and I kind of went to Google, and then I went to the Oxford Dictionary, and I really couldn't find a definition that worked for my experience of designing. So I tried to come up with something that would work, and the first thing I wanted to identify is that design is a process, and it's not an activity. I think there's kind of this popular idea, and it was touched on a little bit yesterday with celebrity designers and all these wonderful design shows, that design is this artistic activity of personal expression. And I think that design is actually a problem-solving process, and it's something that we work through in a rigorous way. And we try to bring our creativity to solve problems. And I think it's important to understand that professional design is not a platform for people to pioneer and express their own personal artistic vision. And that's our take on it at Arc'teryx. So once we have that, what is the process trying to achieve? I think for us, what we're trying to do is take the elements of form and function and then combine them into a single harmonious object. And I think that word harmonious is really important because the human eye has this amazing ability to pick up on proportion, scale, harmony, And we have strong emotional reactions when harmony exists and when it's disrupted. And so this idea of doing things harmoniously will run all the way through this presentation. So once we have this definition, and if we sort of take that on board, then it starts to become much easier to critique work. Because we can look at something like Philippe Starck's juicer, and we can look at it and go, well, does it meet this idea of design? Does it bring form and function together? And I don't know, has anybody actually tried to use this to, yeah, it doesn't work with a shit. And so if anyone's, if you're not familiar with it, the idea is that you cut a lemon in half, and then you very gently put it on top, and with a small amount of agitation, the juice will run down the crevices in the form, and then drip into the glass underneath. And in reality, the legs bend, and the juice goes on the countertop, and not much else happens. But, so I think it's a beautiful piece of art, but I don't think it really represents great design. On the other side, is anyone here from Gopro? So, okay, I was a little unsure. I was just like, yes. This is a great functional object. They allowed a group of engineers to buy a bunch of components that met their specification, and they put them together into the smallest object that they could. But I don't think that they gave a huge amount of thought to the form they were creating with the elements that they had. I think it could be refined to create something that's more compelling. But if you're marketed to 12-year-old boys, I'm not sure how sophisticated you really need to be. But again, by having this definition, we can start to talk about what's strong and what's not strong within each product. And then I think you get examples like this, which I think is a beautiful integration of the aerodynamics of a soccer ball, and then the manufacturing processes that are required to create it consistently, and then the final form that it takes. And so I guess at Arc'teryx, what we're working on is how do we develop the functionality that we need, and then how do we arrange those functional components into the simplest and most harmonious object that we can. So we start with the definition of design. This is what we're trying to achieve. And then out of it, what are we trying to deliver from that process? So for a couple of years now, we've been trying to work out how do we critique our product and how do we decide if it's ready to go. And we've sort of settled on 6 different elements that we think are really important to what we're doing and what we want to contribute to the world. And so the first thing we want is that we think that the product we create should be innovative. I think this is my personal bias, and I think as designers, it's something that we should strive for. But also, I think as designers in this industry, we sit in this really unique position where we have insight into the activities that we're designing for. We have the opportunity to work within this community and see what's happening in the community and how these activities are evolving, and as they evolve, how the user needs are evolving. But then at the same time, we have the opportunity to look at what's happening in materials and look at what's happening in manufacturing and in ergonomics. And the unique opportunity we have is to see where those two worlds collide and where we can create new solutions to empower people to take the next step in each of these activities. And I think it's incumbent upon us to embrace that and use that opportunity to create new things. Yeah, and I think further to that, I guess at Arc'teryx we've always looked at what other people have achieved, what levels of performance, but we've never really spent a lot of time looking at how they did it. That's not really important to us. What's important is what people have achieved. If someone's managed to be lighter, if someone's more breathable, these things are interesting. How they did it, not so interesting. Because I think if you spend too much time looking at other people's work and delving into how they're doing things, then you have two things that I believe will happen. And the first is that if you take the moral high ground and try not to copy someone else's work, and so we would say, Nike's doing it that way, we don't want to do it, we'll do something else, then you actually cut off a whole avenue of exploration which may have led you to a completely different conclusion. And so you just shut down the potential for exploration. And then the second thing that happens probably more commonly is that in a weak moment or in an effort to expedite things, you just take someone else's solution and go, okay, well, they did it, people like it, let's incorporate that into what we're doing. If you haven't traveled the journey of discovery to understand that solution, then the chances that you'll misinterpret it, make a mistake, and have a lesser performing product are really high. And I think this begins the game of design telephone, where each person iterates on someone else's idea, and we just get a poorer and poorer solution until, I'm not sure where the bottom is, but it goes down, and I guess Walmart's at the bottom. And I think finally, the last thing is, if we want to be innovating and driving new products, it really helps to be right. And within that, I think it's really important as designers to fight passionately for the things that you believe in, and also develop the humility to admit when your idea is ultimately stupid and let it go and just walk away and start again. And also, marketing will always tell you that they can't sell it. And so I thought an interesting example to look at would be just the Thermarest Neo program that they developed. I don't know who would have thought that people wanted to buy $250 sleeping mats. And I'm sure they didn't get a whole lot of support as they developed it. But it's an amazing product, and I think that in developing the level of performance and function and the elegance with which they've done it is just reassuring and inspiring that if we have these ideas, if we have genuine performance, and that the performance we're bringing will enhance people's experience, then people are willing to pay. This is a $225 sleeping pad. It's amazing. So we should try and do work that's innovative. Once we do that, we should also try and make sure that our work is relevant. And so here, I would measure this by the idea that the result of our work provides a clear and compelling value equation for our consumers or for the target. And yeah, they just need to be clear and compelling. It doesn't matter how expensive what you create is, if it has a compelling component where people believe that it will make their experience better and their experience of the product is genuine, then I think people are willing to come along with you and try things. And this is an area of really rigorous debate. I think, there's so many rabbit holes we can go down in terms of, we can achieve this, we can achieve that, but which ones are really going to be relevant and which ones are going to resonate in the market? A good example would be, is Gore-Tex relevant to trail running? And you would say, well, most of the time it's not. But if you can create a 150-gram Gore-Tex jacket that you can carry with you at all times and put it on when you need it and take it off when you don't, then all of a sudden, yes, you have something where a waterproof garment can be relevant to a trail runner. And so these are kind of constant battles that we sort of work through of trying to work out, are our ideas relevant? Next up, we need to be authentic. And I can't think of anyone who's more authentic to their trade. And within this, I think our goal is, in the product that we create, we want people using the product to inherently understand our passion for that activity. We want them to use it. We want it to function seamlessly in the field for them, and for them to share with us our passion for that activity. And so I think that's really important, and it's a part of being part of the community that we're serving with the product that we build. And so a big part of that is that Arc'teryx has never really been about trying to build a stable of world-class athletes. It's been about trying to attract people who are really passionate about the activities that we build product for, because it's that passion that takes you out into the worst conditions. It's that passion that has you leaving the car park when it's raining and walking for 2 hours in the mud and just having faith that there'll actually be snow somewhere up there. And those are the days when you work out whether or not your product is working. And they're the days where you learn how to make better product. So we need that passion over athleticism. And then I took a trip just a couple of weeks ago, and we went up to the Canadian Arctic and we thought we'd ride fat bikes across Baffin Island. And just being up there and camping for 9 days at minus 25 and not really being able to ride our bikes at all. It's really funny, hey, the Inuit don't have wheels. But it just reminded me that we make product for places of consequence and activities of consequence, and there's a responsibility there that we need to take seriously. And when we create product, it needs to perform. People choose to do these ridiculous activities, and some for good reasons and some for not so good reasons. But when they do, and when you're trying to cook dinner and it's minus 25, you need things to work. And we have a responsibility to make sure that the performance that we're delivering to our community is a genuine performance and that people can rely that the product will do what we say it's going to do. So, next up. We believe really passionately that we should try and resolve our products. And so, if we look at the idea that design is bringing the elements of form and function together, then resolve would be a measure of how elegantly we've managed to do that. And I think I was trying really hard to do this without putting Apple in here. But I think the reality is that Apple do a beautiful job of this, of seamlessly integrating the functionality of the product into the form in which they deliver it, and then all the way through the user experience. And I think there's a lot that we can take from that. And when I think about when we've been the most resolved in the product that we've created, so much of it has come about through little tricks and little moments of ingenuity that have allowed things which seem to be really complex to actually be broken down into simple steps that are really repeatable. And so for me, our watertight zipper and its glued installation is a beautiful example of that, because the process of cutting the opening, applying the adhesive, and installing the zipper is almost as elegant as the object that it creates at the end. And so I think this is what we strive for in the level that we try to finish our product. And a big part of that is understanding the medium you work in. And I think I've been really fortunate in my career to work for two companies, MacPack and Arc'teryx, that both have their own manufacturing facilities. And they have that ability to be on the factory floor and to see how things work. And it's okay if we can do it 1 or 2 times, but it's really fascinating to talk to someone who has the dubious honor of doing it 200, 300, 400 times an hour, and the insight that they can bring to you about how your processes are working, and did you really resolve this issue for them. When I first started, I moved from equipment design into apparel design. My boss told me that he expected me to sew a jacket start to finish every 6 months, just to keep the reality of how is the overall process of making this product. Because when you work on little pieces in isolation, you can like do a new cuff and you're like, it's probably 513, maybe 514. It's not that hard. But you forget that you made the hood harder the season before, and then you put in a crazy cuff adjustment in the hem. And then when you actually like go back and sew the entire jacket, what you realize is that you're trying to run a marathon in the desert. And you've made this increasing complexity so it's really important to stop, go back, and go through the entire product, not just the little parts that you're working on at any given time. And so if you don't have sewing machines on your design floor, I just implore you to get them, and to sew, and to cut fabric, and to use it, to have it in your hands, because the better you understand the tools and materials you have now, the better you'll be able to imagine the ones that you need in the future. And then next up, products should be beautiful. I think it's our moral obligation to bring beautiful objects into the world. I think in North America in particular, we really undervalue the nature of our public spaces and the spaces that we occupy. But I think that our surroundings have such a powerful impact on our presence and on our experience of life. And so I think the more effort we put into our physical surrounding and creating harmonious spaces and objects to surround ourselves, the better our quality of life. So there's that. But then there's also a commercial impetus to create beautiful products, because if we want to be innovating, if we want to be bringing new ideas to people, then there's two ways that you can get to them. You can go through an extensive marketing process of trying to reach out to them and trying to explain what you've done and then try to overcome any resistance that they have or skepticism to what you're going to do. Or you can just create a beautiful and compelling product, and then people will be drawn to it and they will come and they will experience the benefits that you've already established for yourself and that you believe in. And I think the best example of this is probably, I had to use Apple again, but no one's ever lined up for a BlackBerry. I've never seen a news story of like people sleeping out overnight to, in Hamilton, Ontario, to go and get a new BlackBerry. And for many years, BlackBerry had a superior technology platform. They had so many advantages. But I think what the guys in Cupertino managed to do was create a product that was so compelling that people were drawn to it anyway. And Apple didn't have to invest all of this time explaining the ecosystem to people. They didn't have to say, it's going to function like this and this and this. They just brought out a beautiful object. They took care of all of the little details, and it worked. It's super powerful. And then finally, I think in delivering our projects, we always look to be consistent. And so there's sort of two levels here, I think, to the consistency. And the first would be that we need to be consistent in the values that we bring to the product. So we've always wanted to stand for strength, durability, performance, and simplicity in the mountains. And so we try to be really consistent in delivering that in each product that we make. But the extension of that is the belief that those values should be present in the aesthetic of the product. We should design product that communicates those values to the consumer. And so from applying those values, we then come up with an aesthetic. The aesthetic is our identity. The more consistent we are in applying those values to an aesthetic, to an identity, then the stronger our identity becomes. And so I think Dieter Rams and Braun were amazing at this, and then you watch that flow through, and then you watch it in the work of Jonathan Ives. And I think it's something that we've also tried to learn from them and tried to move within our own work. And so, this would be a representation of it. I think this is our Alpha SV jacket. We've been making it since 1999, and I think for me, it represents those values. I think that it communicates a concept of performance. It communicates a concept of strength and dependability, and there's a strong element of simplicity to it. And if we go back, I think this is the original that we did in 99, 2000. And there was this effort and determination to how are we going to communicate these values, and how are we going to bring them into or make them intrinsic within the product. And so there's this concentration of a strong horizontal component across the chest. It flares to the shoulders. It's this idea of trying to represent masculine athleticism through the emphasis of the shoulders, and then an angulation towards the waist. So trying to take a nod towards this Greco-Roman proportion of the ideal male figure. And then trying to have as few visual elements as we can so that we can promote an idea of simplicity, and through simplicity, durability and dependability. And I think what's interesting is to then take that and move it 16 years forward to this year's version of the Alpha SV jacket. And I think that there is an amazing consistency to how those values have been integrated into the product, and the product still manages to feel current or contemporary today. So those are the deliverables that we've worked on and that I've worked through with the team over the last 10 years. And I guess what I would like to say today is that I think that what's really important is for everybody to work out what their own deliverables are. What is it that you're trying to achieve through the work that you're doing, and how will you know when you've been successful, and how can you be consistent with that? And I think the next important thing is to debate them and to have a really rigorous conversation with your team around what is it that we want to do, how are we going to do it, and are we doing the right thing? And then from that, create a common language for yourself so that everybody's on board and that you have this language that you can use to critique your work and share ideas and get input from as broader, or allow an avenue for everybody to feel that they can contribute meaningfully to the conversation that's going on around design. And so that was it. That's it. I wasn't sure how to finish it. Yeah. I think we have a little bit of time, so if anyone has questions. Yes?
I was wondering how you decide what products to make and not make for Arc'teryx. Like, when you decide that a t-shirt's appropriate, or one end use is appropriate and not another.
Okay, so the question was, how do we decide what products to make and when is a product appropriate and not appropriate for the brand? It's essentially a fist fight, and there's lots of elbows, and it's a really rigorous debate. And I think from the very beginning, I should thank, I forgot at the beginning, to thank Jeremy Gard, who is sort of one of the founding partners and has been a really powerful influence in my design thinking. And he was very much the visionary of this idea that Arc'teryx should try to create a strong aesthetic identity as a brand. And he was always pragmatic in the sense that you have to do the commercial work to pay for your art. And so we try to have a balance of what we think the brand needs to drive revenue versus what we need to pay for the art that we want to bring to the world. So there's a component of that. But then I think we're also really focused on servicing who we see as being our community and what does our community need from the company, and what can we deliver to them. So those are the basic parameters which we wrestle with. I think also that, we have 450 people at head office, and when it comes to that authenticity test, it's pretty easy to just run something around the office and you get a sense really quickly as to whether or not it's resonating within the community that we want. And on that vein, I think also, it came up a couple of times yesterday, but I think as a brand it's important to have a point of view, and we have learned over and over again that we are from Vancouver, we're from the Coast Mountain Range in Canada, and we should make product that's authentic to where we're from. Each time we try to be like, the Europeans would like skinnier pants with flares on the bottom, and we keep trying, and then you realize, well, there's 60 brands in Europe that already make that product, and they make it way better than we do. And so each time we're like, oh, okay, well, we tried, and people just look at it and just go, well, I don't understand why your brand is doing that. And so we try to come back to this idea that we need to have a point of view, we need to be from a place, and we need to represent how we climb in the mountains, run in the mountains, and live our lives in Vancouver. We should make yoga pants. Charles.
What product are you most proud to be associated with the design of? But, a part two to that, what product do you wish you could influence because you think it's not there?
This is going on YouTube, right?
This could be your next job.
I think within the work that I've done, I worked on the first round of our Alpha SV glove, and on the pattern making and the tooling of how to make that glove. And I think for me, that represents a culmination of 10 years of learning in pattern making and working with Gore-Tex. And I think the first generation of that and the dexterity and the process that we developed to make that product is something that I'm really proud of. I think as a designer, like once product hits the market and you have a year to reflect on it, I think that I would do most things a little bit differently. So yeah. Andy.
I spoke to the importance of the common language.
Mm-hmm.
Really establishing that vocabulary. Are there other words other than relevant or authentic and resolve? Are there other quirky words you guys use a lot or you use differently to the way most others think of those words?
Well, I think there's a few Japanese fabric benders that have been going back and trying to work out how thick a pube is. And I don't know that Wikipedia can tell them. But yeah, that's definitely the one that comes up, is that the fabric should just be a pube thinner. And the other one that is notorious is popcorn fart dry, which is something that I'd not heard till I got to Canada. So, but that one definitely gets passed around as well. And again, I think there's fabric vendors from around the world that just can't quite work out how to bring that feature. Yeah. So, yes. Okay, so the question is, how do we deal with internal feedback and how much say does sales have in the product line? And the markets. It depends who you ask. We have platforms for sharing, and we have ways not of listening. And it's, again, it comes back to that paying for art and art. I think it's a really rigorous debate within the company, and I'd say the company is good at having those debates, and it gets emotional and fiery, and there's quite often follow-up meetings to let everybody calm down and come back together. But I would say that it's probably 30 something in terms of commercial input, product line management input, and then input from design and R&D into what goes through. And yeah, but it's definitely a work in progress. Like, we do not have the perfect system for doing that, and we don't always have the perfect result. And we have a lot of products that that we put out there that don't make it. But you have to keep trying, and you have to not be scared of failing. So it's kind of there's some strong personalities in that, so it's inspiring. So, yeah. Yes.
It seems to me that increasing pressure to do something new all the time and to bring it out faster than before. Things like H&M, where we probably move things out every few weeks, and consumers are getting sort of used to seeing a big turnover every month, or a new collection coming all the time. I'm wondering how the outdoor industry will react to that speed of newness.
Yeah, we're slow. We're really slow. I think that we've always tried to just have faith that being consistent fosters loyalty, and so and accepting that we can't be all things to all people, and it's having faith that there's enough people out there who value that slow approach and value the consistency. And will stay loyal to genuine performance. We talk a lot about bringing that the performance we bring needs to be genuine. We need to believe in it. And so we're a lot about refining the ideas that we have rather than trying to revolutionize things on a consistent platform. And I think sometimes paradigm shifts come through the culmination of many, many small advances. So it's okay to just keep making small advances, because if you add them all up, then you actually end up shifting paradigms just over a slower period. But for us as a brand, it's more important to do that than to be driving and having something like fancy and slick every season. So. Oh, in the back.
Way back here. How does Arc'teryx handle the return on investment as it pertains to design? Like, do you have a matrix? Do you have a system in place company-wide that knows how to value design and how to really quantify and measure that, all your hard work and effort?
We're not very good at measuring metrics. Yeah. And so I think someone in the building probably knows, but someone else also keeps him on a short leash and tries not to let him speak too often. His nickname is the Squirrel. because he's always counting things in the corner. But it's not a really prominent component within the company, and we're really fortunate to have had a momentum behind us for a long period now. But I think there is an awareness that can't last forever, and I think we also run really pretty lean. We have a lot of people who drive the business from a passion, and it's not always as expensive as some people would think. So passionate people are cheap. They do a lot of work.
What are the sizes of your delivering and the design department? How many designers in that team?
So the way we're set up is a couple of years ago we changed our structure. So we basically have product teams dedicated to each of our categories. So in apparel we have 6 categories. Each category has a team. And so within that team there'd be 1 to 2 designers, 1 to 2 pattern makers, 3 sample sewers, and then 3 we call them developers, or that did their garment techs that handle communication with factories, specifications and so forth. And so those teams are dedicated to each of their categories. So that means in apparel I think we have 11 designers and 14 pattern makers, 12 sample sewers. It's sort of the size of the apparel things. We also have a position of design developer, which is sort of more like a rapid prototyping position that we have. And so that's someone who sort of combines their sewing with pattern making, and they're the ones where you can just sketch on a napkin and give it to them and see what comes back. So we've been trying to make sure that we have that quick, rapid prototyping ability and that we hold on to it. Originally that job would have been done by designers, and the designers were expected to pattern make and sew, but the line's got to a stage now, and I think the commercial demands of the designer these days in terms of being active in their activity that they're designing for, and being traveling and being in factories, and it's just got too much for them to be pattern making consistently through the year. So we've sort of tried to develop this position that allows for our rapid prototyping. Equipment is set up the same, and I believe it's about half the size of the apparel team. And they handle also our military business and accessories and so forth. So, yes.
Forgive me for being one of the people today in the room. Going from that dialogue we had with Sparkle design much.
Yeah.
How do you guys go after, how do you maintain that consistency? It's important to you, and still kind of seek out new opportunities and seek new consumers. And is it more training exercise, is it more sales exercise, is it design exercise?
We have an imperfect system, which probably creates a little more friction than it needs to. So we have, in design, we have product teams, and then at the top of those product teams, we have a design manager that's responsible for the design of that category, and then we have a development manager that's responsible for the development capacity within that category, and then we have a product line manager for that category. And the idea is that those 3 people at the top are responsible for guiding each category. So it's essentially then to the design manager in each category and the product line manager in each category to come to a common understanding of where they want to take their category, and then to pitch that up to myself and the director of product or the VP of product. And then that's sort of how we work around. And it's a boisterous process, and I think we do it through just having people who are really passionate about it and just who are prepared to get in there and get their elbows out and wrestle. Yeah. But we have work to do to make it a smoother process. Yeah. There's some tension sometimes, but I think that's good. Gerard?
How important do you feel it is personally for designers to have their own insights into designing product in terms of the activity they're carrying out?
Can everybody hear that? So the question is, how important is it for designers to have personal insights into the activity? I think Yeah, I think it's essential, really. I think it came up yesterday, this idea of designing from experience. And again, it comes back to, I don't think that people need to be world-class athletes, but I think that they need to be passionate about the activity and to understand it and to bring insights. And if you can't, you need to surround yourself. You need to know who to trust and surround yourself with people. And I think, the designers don't necessarily always have a deep background in the activities, but then someone in the team, or whether it's the product line manager or whether it's the development team manager, or someone in the broader R&D team, and they're always integrally connected into it. And I think we probably couldn't do what we do in a completely foreign space to us. So yeah, there's definitely product categories that we will never make because we don't understand them. And I mean, European ski pants would be one of those things. But there's lots of others. Someone asked the other day actually about the military component and how do you bring knowledge to that. I think the answer is if you've been lost in the mountains and you've been cold and you've been a little bit scared, then you basically have the foundation to design. So you don't have amazing insights, but you have a foundation to understand their space.
Can you speak to the role of color plays in the design process?
Yes. Yeah, so it's good. We've got some of the color team here, so I'm going to have to be really precise on this. But yeah, for us, we started a long time ago. We've always combined a lot of different fabrics into products. It's one of these things we started doing early on, and it means that our color logistics are disastrously difficult. And so a long time ago, we settled out to have a separate color team working on color and on material procurement. And that really, it was born from that necessity, but it's now become a big part of how we operate. And so we have a separate color creative team with color designers who are responsible for each of the categories. And I think what it allows us to do is to have a more sophisticated color palette at times, and also to really focus on how you can cross-merchandise the line, because it centralizes that color creative. And so that's how we work. So from a design perspective, designers sort of design with how they would like color to be used in the product, but then actually have to cede control over to the creatives within the color team, and let them color the line. And it's not common, I think, to work that way in the industry, but it's certainly been successful for us and allows us to keep a handle on all of our color minimums and where things are going and how we can practically make that work, and then also merchandise across a fairly large product line. So, yes?
Hi, how do you manage innovation in the calendar process for scheduling? Is it on a seasonal basis, an annual basis?
The first answer is badly. And yeah, we have this constant debate about whether or not we should have annual themes. And the design department's like, no, because we don't know if we can deliver something annually. And the PLM and marketing are like, we'll be so much more powerful if we line everything up, and if the gloves come with the boots. So it's a little haphazard, and I think it's a strength and a weakness. I think it ensures that products get launched when they're ready, but it also means that sometimes you're telling way too many stories in one season, and it's really hard to have, you watch products that you've put so much R&D work into, and then that you're trying to push products in 7 different categories in one season, and then like some of them just don't get recognized. And so again, it's an area we have work to do to try and be more consistent in when we deliver. And sometimes it means being patient, and sometimes it means pulling our finger out and being a little bit faster to get things done. And I'm not good at either of those things, so I'm not quite sure how it's all going to come together, but it's something we need to work on.
Yeah, I was, I was recently in Shanghai, and the Arc'teryx store is between like Louis Vuitton and Gucci.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious on how you talk about authenticity, about how you're maintaining authenticity as the business pressure and the brand shows up more on Fifth Avenue than it does in the coastal mountain range of Vancouver?
Yeah, there's been some discussions with the team in China. I think the important thing from the product and design standpoint is that we need to continue to deliver consistently to the core user and accept that there'll always be a component of society that wants to buy the best just because it's the best, and that it will be, and that will happen. But the important thing is that we continue to create genuine performance components to our product and that we stay focused. And it's definitely a point of anxiety with many people, especially with the state of the Canadian peso right now, as to how you do that and remain relevant within that core community. And so it's difficult, and there's a lot of anxiety around it at times. But I think the commitment is to continue to build high performance product and put it out into the world. It's probably the best answer. Maybe talk about real estate choices. Can we take that part of YouTube? Yes.
Just curious how your hardlines team and your softlines team collaborate to work together to make consistent storytelling of products, or does that even happen? Like the backpacks and Carol, color stories and style.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've been working really hard to, some of the ideas in here are part of a larger document that we have within the company, which talks about, this is sort of 1/4 of a document that talks about how we want to design product and about this common language. And it's about trying to communicate that common language across all of design. So that goes all the way through into the graphic designers that are working with the creative services team and so forth, so that we have that understanding. It's a pretty tight-knit team, and we all sit together in one big open space, and everybody has their work out on their desks, and there's a lot of lunchtime probing of just like walking around and like picking up what other people are working on, and so I think the fundamental is having a common design language and a common set of beliefs around what we're trying to achieve, and then it largely falls into place. But it's also not perfect, and sometimes most of the time it goes smoothly, but sometimes we get some outliers as well. So yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for having me.